Hey there, this is part 5 in our create WhatsApp web clone with Appwrite and Vue. We're going to continue on with the group creation process. Last section or last episode we stopped in the middle because it was getting a little bit long. But if we take a look at where we were holding, so we have the sidebar. You can start creating the new group. You can add the participants. And we're going to pick off where we left off from there. So if we go back to the code, we're in the new group participants sidebar, and what we need to add to here is essentially the button that will take us to the next part. So a section, and in this section we're going to have a class which is equal to absolute, since we're going to position it lower down, bottom 0, width full, height 28. We're going to want a background gray of 100, flex items center, justify center. And inside here, we're going to have a div. This will be our container for the actual button, where we're going to have bg custom WhatsApp 1. We're going to have a width of 12, a height of 12, height of 12. We're going to have a rounded full. Let's make it a round button, text white, flex items center, justify center. All right, and in here we're going to put our actual button, just add on a cursor pointer to make it clickable. And in here, we're going to put our right arrow button. So we're going to just right here, arrow right button, or arrow right icon rather. And we're just going to stick that in here. And we can make that self-closing. It's always better. And we're going to have a class of width 6. And when I click it, it will take me to the show group info view, which will essentially take me to the next step. The function show group info view. And all that will do is the global store dot show sidebar view dot new group info. And if we just take a look here, so we'll see we now have well, that didn't work. We need to have our arrow right icon, which is fine when I click it. So this should all be fine. Let's just refresh the page. Sometimes you just need to actually refresh with hero icons. And if we take a look here, yeah, bam, we see we now have the next arrow icon. So when I click ASD, next, it will take me to, well, a blank page for now, but we'll create that right now. So we want the new group info. So let's make that component. So new group info sidebar. This is just where we're going to put the name of the group. In the future, we're going to have the profile image over here of the actual group. So let's jump right into that. So we're always going to need a template. Let's create our script, setup, lang equals ts, and start writing the component. So we have a header, which is fairly standard. We're just going to copy the same exact header from everywhere else. So I'll just take this header and paste it there. On click, we're going to have the on back. So just make a placeholder for that so it's not red. Cool. So that's what happens when I click back. Beneath the header, we're going to have a div, which is going to be width full, flex, margin top of 10, items center, justify center. Now this part is going to be the place where we put our profile image for the group, or the group image rather. So we have a div, with a class of width 44, height 44, background of gray 500, rounded full. We want it to be completely round. We're going to flex items center, justify center, and relative, since we're going to have a position absolute element inside here. The next thing we need to do is create the container for that icon. So we want a div, which is going to be flex column. We got items center, justify center, text center, text white absolute, and we're going to want to center it vertically. So I'm going to say top 1-2, or basically half distance from the top, or top 50% rather. We want left 1-2, same thing, left 50%. We're going to want to transform. We want minus translate x 1-2, or 1/2, which is just negative translate x of 50%, and minus translate y of 1/2. And this is just to absolutely center a element. It's a useful trick to know. And inside here, we're going to put our camera icon. So we'll just auto import that camera icon from the solid icon pack. So we have the camera icon, which we're going to put here, camera icon, which will be class equals width of 6, like all the rest of our icons. We're going to have some text, which will be add group icon, and underneath this div, we're going to have our user group icon, and we're just going to put that over here, which will have a class of text gray 300. It'll have a width of 28 and a opacity of 10% or 0.1. And if we just take a quick look at what that looks like, we first have to set that up. So if we go to our application, so we need to just import the new group info sidebar, and we only want to show this if the sidebar view is equal to sidebar view dot group info. All right, and if we look back here and refresh, go through this process real quick. Failed to resolve new group info sidebar, which means we didn't import it correctly. New group info sidebar, not this one, this one. We need to auto import this. And here we now have the group info, where we're going to put the profile picture. Something I see that is missing here is the back arrow, and that's just because we did not import the back arrow icon, which we'll do right here. We just need the left arrow, or is it arrow left icon? Yeah, arrow left icon. And if we go back here now, we have the back button. All right, cool. The next thing that we need to do is create the input where you type in your new group's name. So let's add a new section, which is going to be a section, and we're going to say a class of padding x of 2, padding y of 2, which of course can be shorted to padding 2, and a margin top of 4. Inside here, we're going to have our input component. So input control space to auto import that. And we want type equals text. We want our v model to be equal to group store dot new well, we're going to import that first. So const group store is equal to use group store. And just to remind you, this is where we're storing the information for the group we want to create. So we want new group dot name. And the last thing we want to do is add the placeholder, which is going to be the group name dot dot dot. All right, and if we just take a quick look here, we have the group name. Something interesting I want to show you to debug is if you actually type something in here and go to your dev tools and open up the Vue panel. That's if you installed the Vue dev tools Chrome extension. So go there, click Vue. You can actually see over here, if you click on this 3 blocks pinya, so we have the group store, and you can see that the name is ASD, and we have our invitees over here, which shows the text we put in. Well, the back isn't working yet, but essentially this is the text where we created those little badges that denote the people we're inviting to this group. So that's really cool and really useful in case something goes wrong. You can debug and make sure everything is hooked up properly to the store. Moving on. So we've created that input, and the last thing we need to do is create the section, which is, all right, let's create our group. So, you know, the check mark icon. So vif, we want to check. We only want to show this if the group store dot new group dot name dot length is greater than 0. We want to make sure that there's actually going to be a name for this group, and if there is that, if this condition is met, then we want to show the check icon. So let's just do flex with full, justify, center. We're going to want a margin top of 20. And I missed that 0 there. Margin top of 20. Inside here, we're going to want our checkmark button. So it's just going to be a div with a class equal to bg custom WhatsApp 1. Width 12, height 12, rounded, full, text white, flex, items center, justify center. And we're just going to want to add the cursor. And at some point, we're going to refactor this into a common button since we've been doing this a lot, these exact stylings. And that's not such good practice in case we want to make a single change to all the buttons. It's going to be a little bit difficult for us to do that. So at some point, we'll refactor this into a button component. And then we just want to have our check icon. So check icon, and we're just going to stick that in here. Check icon, which we want to have the standard width 6. And when I click it, we want to create group. And let's just go there, function, create group. Let's quickly hook up our on back over here, which we say when I click on back. So I just want to say const global store is equal to use global store. And then we want to say global store dot show sidebar view dot, the previous one is new group participants. Now for the create group, this is finally where we're going to be starting to use the Appwrite backend to actually do something. So let's jump right into it because there's still a lot of ground to cover. So the best way to approach this is, first of all, we're going to need to extract a little bit of our configuration into a config file. Right now we have everything in our api.ts, and it's not great since we're going to need to add in more things, and when we migrate to different environments, this is going to be a little bit of a pain. So I'm going to create a new file called config.ts in the root of our project. And essentially over here, we're going to store all of our information. So the first thing we want is to copy over this endpoint, and we're just going to call this const endpoint is equal to that. Well, is equal to that. At the bottom over here, we're just going to say export endpoint. We also want the project ID, which is our Appwrite project ID. So const project. And the reason I make this all uppercase is because these are constants, and that's just something I do for constants. I just put them all uppercase so that I know that these things aren't going to change. Project ID. And I think that's it for now. We're gonna need to add more things in a second, but I think this is good for now. And all we want to do now is just, instead of using hard-coded strings, we're going to say this is going to be endpoint, and this is going to be project ID. All right, cool. So now that we have that, we're going to need to set up our teams. Okay, now the thing that I want to point out here is if we look at our Appwrite, the way we're going to actually create groups is using a built-in functionality that Appwrite provides, which is called teams, right? So Appwrite has users, but they also have teams, and teams are a way of grouping users. Now with WhatsApp, there are groups. So in my eyes, it logically makes sense to use the term teams to create WhatsApp groups. And even with one-on-one chats, we're gonna make that a team just because it makes things easier. So essentially, if we look at a team, so when you create a resource in Appwrite, be that a database or files in storage, or if you're creating a function, everything is based on roles. So just to show you what I mean really quickly is if I create a new database, let's just call this WhatsApp, and let's create that. And let's add a collection. I'll just call this messages. And it's not important to follow along right now. You can see that we have collection level permissions and we have document level permissions. We're gonna, just to emphasize this, I'll show you with collection level. So you can see we have read access, which means who has access in general to this entire collection. So this could be role all, or it could be the user ID or team ID. And you can see over here that this is where team ID comes in really handy, because when we send messages, we want the entire team to have access to it. And it'd be really painstaking if we had to assign user ID access on an individual level. So we're going to use teams for this. I'm just going to delete I'd rather just delete the entire database since we're not going to be using it for now, and move on. All right, so in order to actually create a team with the information that we have here, we're going to need to set up the Teams API. So all that entails is just saying const team is equal to new teams, and you just have to pass through the Appwrite client into there, and we're just going to export that. And it's really just as simple as that. If we look at what functions we have here, team.create, you can create membership, excuse me, which is how you can add someone to your team. And all the functionality regarding teams is essentially on this object, or on this class rather. So let's actually jump right into creating our new team. So we're going to do that from our group store. So if I go to stores and group store, we're going to create a function in here called create. Oh, this is going to be an async create group. And the first thing we're going to need to do is actually create the group with Appwrite, and then we're going to need to invite all the invitees to that group. And we're going to do things a little bit differently just so that I can show you another aspect of Appwrite, but it's not the standard way of doing it, but I'll show it to you anyway because it's important to be exposed to that part of Appwrite. So the first thing we're going to do is in our API folder, we want to create a new file called groups. groups.ts. And here's where we're going to store all the functions that pertain to groups. In fact, since it's Appwrite, I'm actually going to name it teams. Teams.ts. Now, we're just going to create a function, an async function called create group. And this is going to use the team API from Appwrite, which you can see we imported from index.ts over here. And all we need to do is say we want to pass through the name of the group, which is a string. And we're going to return team.create name. Team.create rather unique, which is our way of telling Appwrite that we want them to generate a unique ID for this team and the name. While we're at it, we're just going to get ourselves a way to list all the teams or groups that we have access to. So I'll just say get groups, and we're just going to return, let's do this a bit differently. We're going to say const teams is equal to await team dot list, and then we say dot teams. And this is just going to be our way of getting the teams we're a member of, and we're not going to use this just now, but it's good for future proofing. So if we go back to our create group here in the group store, we essentially want to say const team is equal to await create group. Well, it's not this dot create group. We're going to want to import that from API teams, and we're going to pass through this dot new group dot name. And if we hooked all of this up together, if we go back to our new group info, all we're going to say in the create group is going to say group store dot create group. And if everything is hooked up properly, we will now see, if I refresh the page, we'll say, all right, we want to start a new chat. We're going to start a new group. We're going to call it the awesome people, and go next. We're going to say the group, oh, that was a mistake on my part. We want to actually say these are the people who are inviting. So we want to invite John at gmail.com. We want to invite Joe at gmail.com. And when I click next, we want to make the group name, these are the awesome people, and create. And if we look in our Appwrite background now, if everything was done correctly, we now have a group called the awesome people. There's only one member right now, which is me. And you can see that I am, well, over here you can see that I am the group's owner. All right, so if we summarize, we basically managed to create a group with all the information that we wanted. In the next video, we're going to actually invite these people. We can actually invite John and Joe. We're going to do that using Appwrite functions. We're going to send a request to the Appwrite function saying, please add these users to our group. We're going to have to handle some edge cases where what happens if the user doesn't have an account yet with our WhatsApp web clone. We're going to deal with that. We're going to learn how to deploy functions, and it's going to be really exciting. And I'll see you in that one. Have a good one. Bye-bye.